Sound with me, put my PowerPoint up. It's a sermon by Eaton 2019. So, pardon the hoarseness of my voice. As I said before, the winter cold has hit my house pretty hard. Every single person in my house is sick, me probably worst of all. And I know exactly how it happened too. Sometimes when you get sick, you're like, how did that happen? I've been so safe. No, not me. I know exactly how it happened. I was holding my son Noah, my arms like this. And he's sick, and he was sick himself. And he took his hand, he put his hand on my mouth, hold my mouth open, and sneezed in my mouth.
That happens.
That is exactly how I got sick. So speaking of appreciating our music team, I really, I couldn't sing today. I could not sing a note. Last night I was trying to sing Shalom Aleichem for Shabbat. I could not a note was coming out. So I really want to thank our music team, especially Yaakov and Neil and Felipe, who really stepped up there. So please give them a hand because they really helped me out today.
Sure did.
Just to make a quick announcement before I get into my message proper. On December 28th, which is the last December of this month, you're going to hear a lot of this today, part of my coughing. We are going to be having our Hanukkah party. Give me one moment. Compose myself. Don't feel mortified. I'm going to be doing this throughout the sermon. So we will be having our Hanukkah party. We have a lot of fun stuff planned. I don't know, we have a spiel. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but we'll be working on it. We have a lot of other fun stuff going on here. So please be sure you're here. This is going to be a really fun day to close out what's been a really great year for us. But this is going to be one of those years when Hanukkah and Christmas overlap. So, I don't know about, so I think Hanukkah starts on like the 21st, 22nd, it goes all the way through until when it's 29th or something like that. So, it's one of those weird holidays where the two holidays overlap. I call it Christmas coming. So, I don't know about you, but on December 24th, which is, really traditionally when my family has observed Christmas with my dad's non-Jewish side of the family. So my day's going to go a bit like this. So I'm going to go home. I'm going to put my kippah on. I'm going to light the candles on my Hanukkah, say the Hanukkah blessings, and give my family presents. And then I'm going to take my kippah off, put on a little Santa hat, light up a Christmas tree, sing some carols, and give my family more presents. It's great to be a kid on Christmas Day. Not so great to be a dad, who's got budget. But isn't this a perfect picture of what being a Messianic Jew is like? Yes. So much like December 25th, 2019, Messianic Jews exist in this strange state of being almost two things at once. So on one hand, we are very much Jews. We live Jewish lives. We circumcise and bar mitzvah our children, associated with others. We keep kosher. We observe Sabbath. We fulfill our covenantal duties to the God of Israel. But at the same time, we who are Messianic Jews, we are believers in Messiah Yeshua, and we are a part of this greater body of Messiah that includes so many non-Jewish people. And sometimes it can be hard to tell where one of our parts ends and the other begins. So this coming 25th or 24th, all over the world there are going to be Jews celebrating Christmas, Gentiles celebrating Hanukkah, Canadians celebrating Boxing Day. It can be confusing, especially on days like this, to understand what our identity is, who we truly are in God's eyes. And I think the struggle for identity is really exemplified in the life of our patriarch, Jacob. So, the story of Jacob is told over the course of 3-part show, Toldot, Vayetze, and Vayeshmach, and Vayetze this week. And so we're currently right in the middle of Jacob's story in our reading cycle. But I was thinking this week, rather than focus on the individual parsho, I want to take a look at Jacob's story as a whole and see what we can learn about Jacob's struggle for identity and what it means for us in our own struggles. So what I want to do today is, I'm a big picture guy, so I like to kind of take all of it, put it together. So I want to look at this story and specifically at 3 particular verses, one from each of these parsho, and that really just tie this story together in a neat way. So these 3 verses, they're from Genesis 27, 29, and 33. And we're going to go through them one at a time. going to see how each one leads to the next, and how they tell the story of how Jacob, the trickster, becomes Israel, the father of the Jewish people. So if you have your Bibles, you can open up to Genesis 27, and we're going to dive right in. We're going to go to Genesis 27:38. I'll read this quote here from Genesis, from Parshat Toldot. Esau said to his father, "You have just one blessing, my father. Bless me too, my father." And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. So, the first verse we're going to look at is from Toldot, Genesis 27:38. And I think this is a story that we are all very familiar with. Our mother Rebecca conceives twin boys who she can feel at war within her womb. And the Lord sends her a prophecy that, that two nations are within her, and the younger will be greater than the elder. So the twins are born with the younger son, Jacob, clutching at the heel of his elder brother Esau as they come out, just holding on to him, he's not going to let go. And this sets the tone for their relationship for the rest of their lives. And we see that when they're older, that Jacob, desiring to have Esau's birthright, tricks his brother into trading it for a bowl of soup, if you're familiar with that story. And then later on, at his mother's urging, Jacob puts on Esau's clothes and tricks his blind father into blessing him in his brother's place. We should probably get a different microphone for whoever uses one next. So I read this story as a kid. Especially, I love using these illustrations from the children's Bible. That one on the right is the one I had when I was a kid. And, I read the story as a kid, and it made a lot of sense to me then. See, Jacob is the good guy, and Esau is the bad guy. The good guy wins in the end, right? But now as an adult, when I read this, I feel very conflicted. So, if you read the scriptures, Esau is clearly portrayed as the villain, not just in Genesis, but all over the Bible. The prophet Malachi, he rails against Esau and his descendants, and he pronounces judgment deserving on them. The writer of Hebrews tells us that no one was more unholy than Esau. See, if Esau was willing to sell his birthright for a bowl of soup, could he really be entrusted with the covenant of Abraham? See, Isaac was not only physically blind, but he was also blind to his son's faults. Had Esau obtained his father's blessing, he would have become the father of the Jewish people, and we would have been doomed to immorality and evil from the beginning. So Jacob and Rebekah, they had no choice but to act to safeguard the future of the Jewish people. And yet, when I read this story, I'm finding that the one that I emphasize with is not Jacob and Rebekah. It's Isaac and Esau. Again, this is the picture from the children's Bible I read when I was a kid. And this image of anguish that Isaac and Esau feel it stayed with me my whole life. I always remember this picture. So the Torah, if you know anything about it, you read it. The Torah is very sparing when it comes to describing emotion. During the events of the binding of Isaac, we aren't told once how Isaac was feeling during that harrowing episode. But when he realizes that Jacob deceived him, we're told that he trembled violently and that Esau burst out with a loud and bitter cry. It's not the language of villains being outwitted. It's the language of loss and betrayal and, yes, injustice. Jacob took something that didn't belong to him, and he deeply hurt two people that he loved in the process. So, how are we supposed to feel about this story? Was Jacob right to steal the blessing? Did the ends justify the means? If you were to pull out the Chumash that we usually keep on our bima here, most Jewish commentators will say that they did, that the ends did justify the means. That I think that if we do what I talked about, if we look at this story as a whole, from beginning to end, we will see that Jacob was actually in the wrong when he stole his father's blessing, and that his actions led to unnecessary suffering for everyone. So let's take a look at just what it was that Jacob stole from Esau. So this is the blessing that Isaac gives to Jacob when he's disguised as Esau. So when you break down all this fancy language, what is it that Isaac wants to bless Esau with? Let me just read this here. Jacob says, may God, this is Isaac speaking to Jacob dressed as Esau. He says, may God give you from the dew of the sky, from the fatness of the land, and an abundance of grain and new wine. So grain, wine, abundance of land. Isaac is blessing Esau with wealth. And then he goes on and he says, may people serve you, and may nations bow down to you. Be master over your brothers. May your brother's sons bow down to you. So now he wants to give servants, people bowing down, mastery. Isaac is blessing Esau with power. So wealth and power. These are nice things to have, but these are not the blessings of the covenant. Let's look at this one here. Let's read this one out loud. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the people on earth will be blessed through you. The promises that God makes to Abraham and Isaac have nothing to do with wealth or power. God never promises the Jews will be rich and powerful. God tells Abraham that he will bless him with many children, and that he will give his descendants a land to call their own. And Isaac knows this. God promises Isaac the same thing. Children and land. This is from later on in Genesis. This is Isaac's true legacy, not wealth and power. And Isaac understands this. See, Isaac isn't as blind as some might think. Isaac loved Esau, but he understood who Esau was. He saw him sell his birthright for a bowl of soup. Isaac knew that as much as he loved Esau, he wasn't the one to carry on the covenant that meant everything to his family. And so when the time came for him to bless Esau, he gave him the gifts that he knew his son would appreciate: wealth and power. And he could give those to Esau because he had a separate blessing laid aside for Jacob. So in the next chapter, as Jacob is preparing to leave his home to seek out a wife for himself, Isaac calls Jacob to him. And this must have been an awkward situation. You think Isaac would never want to speak to his son again after what he did. But instead, Isaac brings him in, and he gives Jacob a blessing. Isaac says, may El Shaddai bless you, and make you fruitful, and multiply you so that you will become an assembly of peoples. And may he give you the blessing of Abraham to you and to your seed, so that you may take possession of the land of your sojourn, which God gave to Abraham. Children and land, these are the blessings of the covenant. These are the blessings that Isaac always intended to give to Jacob. Jacob never needed to disguise himself. He never needed to trick his father or steal from his brother. If Jacob had trusted more in the Lord and had the patience to wait, God would have fulfilled his plans for Jacob's life in his own time. But this is Jacob's character arc. This is part one of his story. Jacob is born clutching Esau's heel. He buys Esau's birthright. He steals Esau's blessing. He even dresses up in Esau's clothing and tells his father, I am your son, Esau. Jacob wanted what Esau had because he wanted to be Esau. He wanted to be the eldest. He wanted to be strong, powerful, a hunter. He wanted to be his father's favorite. One of Jacob's major flaw is that he is so busy trying to be Esau that he never realizes who he is. He never realizes that he is the chosen of God, that he is the one who will fulfill the promise that God made to Abraham. And so Jacob makes a terrible mistake. Rather than trusting God's plan, Jacob tries to take his destiny in his own hands, and the result is devastating. The bond of trust between father and son is broken. The bond of love between brothers is shattered. And Jacob is forced to flee from his home from the wrath of Esau. Jacob will never see his mother again. So Jacob's actions in part 1 ended in Esau's tears. In part 2, Jacob will face the consequences of his action and shed tears of his own. So if you still in your Bibles, I want you to turn to Shabbat.Jared, Genesis 29. Now, when Jacob saw Rachel, he lifted up his voice and wept. So in the aftermath of Jacob's deception, Esau vows that he will kill his brother the first chance that he gets. So their mother, Rebekah, gets wind of this, and he tells Jacob that he needs to leave home for a few days until Esau's calmed down. She tells him to go and hide out with her brother Laban until the heat dies down. But Rebekah doesn't know that a few days will turn into 20 bitter years for Jacob before he can return home. So the second verse I want to look at is Genesis 29:11, up there on the screen. Jacob goes to a well. He travels to the land where his uncle lives, and he goes to a well, and he asks some local shepherds if they know his kinsman Laban. And while they're conversing, Laban's daughter Rachel arrives to water her flock. And what happens next is a mystery to the sages. So upon seeing Rachel, we're told that Jacob lifts up his voice and weeps. Now, on first reading, you probably won't think a lot of this. You'll think, oh, Jacob, he was happy to see her. Or maybe it was love at first sight, and Jacob was overcome with emotion. But both of these explanations require the tears that Jacob sheds over Rachel to be tears of joy. And that's not what the text says. So this helps you know a little bit about Hebrew. The Hebrew text says, Vayisa kolo vayevech. And he lifted up his voice and wept, is how it's translated. Now that expression is not used very often in the Bible. And every time it's used is to express not tears of joy, but a deep sense of loss and mourning. If you do a word study of lifted up their voices and wept, you'll see these words when Hagar, Sarah's servant, believes that her son is going to die. When in the book of Ruth, when Naomi parts from her daughters forever, she lifts up her voice and weeps. In the prophets, when Israel believes that they are not strong enough to enter the land in Torah, they lift up their voices and weep in sorrow. This is the weeping of David over his kidnapped wives. It's the weeping of a nation that's been declared unworthy. This is never an expression of joy. It's always one of regret and seeing the things you love slipping through your fingers. And if this expression sounds a little bit familiar, it's because it's used one more time in Torah, when Esau realizes that Jacob has taken his blessing. The text is intentionally drawing attention to the slim similarities between these two verses. It's almost saying that because Jacob caused Esau to weep, now it's Jacob's turn to experience loss. But why would Jacob weep in sadness when he saw Rachel? Again, in your Chumash, Rashi, the medieval commentator, he has two explanations. Rashi says that when he saw Rachel, God sent Jacob a prophetic vision. He saw that as much as he may love her, Rachel would not be buried with him. Jacob saw a vision of Rachel dying young while he was still a wanderer, and saw himself being forced to bury her far from home, forever separated from her in death. Rashi's second explanation was that Jacob wept because he was coming to his bride empty-handed. He said to himself, "My grandfather's servant, Eleazar, came to Laban with 12 camels packed with gold, but I had nothing but my own hands with which to purchase my wife." But that just raises more questions. Isaac and Rebekah should have known better than anyone how Laban works, and what it would take for Jacob to come home with a bride. So why would they send him to Laban empty-handed? So, diving more into the sages, Rashi has an explanation for that one as well. He quotes from a midrash that says that while Jacob was traveling to Bethel, Esau sent his son Eliphaz to follow Jacob and kill him on the way. So what happens next is it's like right out of Snow White. So Eliphaz catches up to Jacob, but he doesn't have the heart to kill his uncle. but he can't just return home either. So Jacob tells Eliphaz, take my money instead and bring it to Esau as proof that you have killed me. To be a beggar is as good as dead anyway. So Jacob, who left home a wealthy man, arrives at Laban's house, a beggar. And when he sees Rachel, he instantly falls in love with her and knows that he has to be with her at any cost. But he also knows that Rachel will not be his without years and years of hardship. And in the end, after working so hard to get her, he will lose her in death. And so Jacob lifts up his voice and he weeps for the losses that he knows he will bear and because it all could have been avoided. He had just been patient and waited for God to bless him in his own time. If Jacob had not stolen Esau's blessing, he would have been able to pay Rachel's bride price up front and return home in just a few days. Instead, Jacob must reap the harvest of his deception under the whip of his uncle Eaton. Let's talk about Laban for 1 minute here, because he's an interesting figure. He's almost too bad to be true. He's like the villain of a kid's cartoon show, where he's just there to teach the kids not what to do. And this is funny. If you read your commentary, it's great. Rashi hates Laban. I was actually laughing while I was reading his commentary, because he has nothing nice to say about Laban. So for example, there's a scene where Laban makes his entrance into the story. And he runs to greet Jacob, and he hugs him, and he kisses him. You know, what a nice guy. But Rashi comments, when Laban heard that Jacob had come, he ran as fast as he could, because he thought that Jacob must have brought 10 camels laden with gifts for him. When he arrived and he saw no camels, he thought, oh, maybe he's got cash. He's hiding, keeping it in his shirt. So he hugs him. He's feeling over cash. And when he didn't find any money, he thought, maybe he's keeping pearls in his mouth. So he kissed him to see if there's anything in his mouth. So you get the picture. Laban is presented as the embodiment of avarice. Every interaction he has in the Bible is about business, and he's trying to get over on someone else. So that's not a person. That is a plot device. And that's how I see Laban. He wasn't a villain. He was someone that God had put into Jacob's life so that his story could progress to the next chapter. For Jacob to grow as a person, he had to learn his lesson. Jacob's already begun to suffer the consequence of his actions, but he still had to learn why what he did was so wrong. And in this incredibly karmic story, Laban, of all people, is the one who teaches Jacob the error of his ways. So let's take a look at what happens. This is another familiar story here. So Jacob agrees to work for Laban for 7 years in return for Rachel's hand in marriage. But on the wedding night, what should have been the happiest day of Jacob's life, history repeats itself. First, Laban prepares great feasts to distract Jacob. And then, under the cover of darkness, when Jacob is blind, Laban disguises Leah, Rachel's sister, in Rachel's wedding clothes to bring her to Jacob. And in the morning, he's had a lot to drink that night. And in the morning when the sun rises, after he's already consummated the marriage, he realizes he's been tricked. And he rushes to confront Laban. He asks him, "Why have you deceived me?" And Laban just gives him this sick burn in response. He tells Jacob, "It's not the practice in our place to marry the younger before the elder. I don't mind they do things where you come from, Jacob. But around here, the younger doesn't take what belongs to the elder." Jacob has no response. You think he'd be mad. I think he put up a fight here. He could have argued that the marriage was made in good faith. He could have demanded an annulment. We could have just taken Rachel and made her run for it. He does later. But instead, he remains silent and accepts Laban's terms. Jacob finally knows how it feels to be the victim of deceit. How much it hurts. How damaging it is to the relationship. In a way, Jacob finally gets what he's always wanted. Now he knows what it feels like to be Esau. And in part 3 of his story, Jacob can finally start being himself. So if you still get your Bibles out, we're going to go to Parsha Vayishlach, the last Parshat, Jacob's story. We go to Genesis 33. And then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, and fell on his neck and kissed him, and together they wept. So at the beginning of Parshat Vayetze, Jacob came to Laban's house with nothing more than his walking staff. But after 20 years and more drama than we have time to cover today, God finally appears to Jacob again and tells him, it's time to go home. So Jacob leaves Laban's house with 2 wives, 2 maids, 11 children, and more wealth than he knows what to do with. But there's one thing standing in between Jacob and home. Esau. In order to return home, Jacob must travel through the territory of Eaton and confront the brother that he deceived all those years ago. And even worse, Jacob receives word that Esau is going to meet him with 400 men. So Jacob can only expect that his brother has assembled this force to kill him and everyone he loves. But Jacob cannot ignore the command of God. He has to go home. So Jacob and his party must cross the Jordan River to enter back into the Promised Land. And Jacob sends all of his possessions and his family on ahead of him until he is the only one left on the far side of the river. And then, once he's all alone, one of the most mysterious episodes in the Bible occurs. So the Torah is very sparse on details. So, with your permission, I'm going to engage in a little amateur storytelling of how I imagine this encounter went. This is not authoritative. This is my personal imagination. The drama is being ruined by this baby because someone, I don't know who brought the baby today. Jacob stands on the banks of the river. It's okay. So Jacob stands on the banks of the river, unable to force himself to cross over. To cross the river would mean that he is truly going back home. It means that he will have to face his father, his brother, his past. So as he stands, unable to move his feet, he hears footsteps approaching in the gloom, and he sees a man walking towards him. Jacob calls out for the stranger to identify himself, but the man doesn't respond. Instead, he rushes at Jacob and throws him to the ground. Jacob leaps to his feet and grabs the man before he can attack him again. "What do you want?" Jacob cries out. But the man is silent. The 2 men grapple through the long night. Over and over again, Jacob asks the man, "What do you want? Who are you?" But he never gets an answer. Jacob cannot see the face of his opponent in the dark. He can only catch glimpses. At times, the man looks like Laban, who deceived him and treated him like a slave. But then the face would change to that of his father, Isaac, who always favored his elder brother over him. And the man's face would change again, and at times would look like Rachel, and other times like Leah, his 2 wives, who needed so bitterly for his affections, and whom he struggled to keep the peace between. But then the man's face changed one more time, and Jacob was grappling with Esau. And with renewed strength, Jacob threw his brother to the ground, and he climbed on top of him, ready to throttle the life out of the man who he had loved, who he feared, who he looked up to, and who he envied. And just then, sun crests over the horizon, and Jacob saw the face of the man clearly for the first time. And the man bore Jacob's very own features. Jacob had been wrestling with himself all night. "Who are you?" Jacob asked. And finally the man answered him, "Why do you ask my name? The real question is, who are you?" And Jacob, completely exhausted, can only answer, "I don't know." And God said, "I know who you are. You are Israel, my beloved. You will strive against God and against men, but you will prevail because I am always with you. Now, Jacob, go home." And Jacob crosses the river a different man than he was the night before. And with renewed resolve, Jacob separates hundreds of sheep, goats and cattle and donkeys from his herds, and he drives them ahead of him with a message that they are a gift for Esau. And as Jacob and Esau's forces approach each other, Jacob, who had been the last to cross over the river, walks to the front of the party and puts himself in between his family and Esau. And when the two meet, before any words are said, Jacob walks out and bows down before Esau. Now Jacob is doing more than just trying to appease his brother. He is returning Esau's stolen blessing back to him. And Jacob gives him a gift of wealth in the animals and power by bowing down before him, wealth and power. And Jacob goes before Esau and says, please take back my blessing, because God has given me enough. Everything that Isaac had promised to Esau, Jacob gives back to him. And when Jacob rises, the two men run to each other and embrace and weep. But this time, rather than tears of sorrow and loss, they cry tears of joy. God has healed their hurts and restored their relationship. Esau has regained his blessings, and Jacob has regained his brother and his identity, and can finally come home. Friends, when I read the story of Jacob, I see the struggle of so many of my own as a Messianic Jew. I identify with his struggle for identity, his struggle to find a place in the world, his struggle to be a blessing. But when I call out to the Lord and I ask him, who am I? God gives me the same answer he gave Jacob. He tells me, I know who you are. You are my beloved child. You will struggle, but you will overcome, because I am always with you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.